Hey, what's up? My name is Steve Peterson, and this is my 2014 Hyundai Veloster Turbo.
Well, today, boys and girls, we are going to be talking about spark plugs and ignition coils for the Veloster. And we're only doing that because I recently put a new set of ignition coils in. And I'm going to be doing a new set of plugs probably next week when I get a little bit more time. But for now, I don't know, maybe I'll throw the plugs in tonight. Who knows? But for now, I'm going to show you how easy it is to do your own ignition coils and spark plugs on your own Hyundai Veloster. Whether you have the non-turbo or the turbo model, the process is exactly the same. And then I'm going to show you some comparisons in what a aftermarket ignition coil looks like and what the OEM ignition coils should look like. I'll give you the OEM part number, and we're going to talk about spark plugs. I've got some kind of a small collection of plugs as I've changed them over the years. I have a few other sets that I've thrown away and things like that. But this is just a couple of recent sets that I've kept. I'll talk about what those look like after so many miles that they've been in the car. And we'll talk about some of the differences. You can actually see, even just right now, some of the variances in those plugs. These are 3 different sets that I had in the car at 3 different occasions over the years. This is going to be a brand new set, so we'll see what those look like. So to really get you up close here so that you can see some of the differences in these plugs, I'm going to try to get the light in the right place and get everything to focus here so you can kind of see what I'm talking about with these plugs. So right here, you can see this is one of the last sets of plugs that I pulled out of my car. This was 3 years ago, maybe. I did these plugs. I pulled these out when I blew a head gasket on my car. I had the head off, so I replaced plugs then. You can see that one is not like the rest. You can see that the ceramic here on, I'm assuming that's ceramic. I don't know what that white part of the spark plug is, but it looks like ceramic. You can see these ones are fairly clean. You can actually see which plug most likely came out of the, I think it was this one. It was the one that came out of the blown head gasket cylinder for sure, because of just how much cleaner it is compared to the other plugs. You can actually see on this one, if it'll show up in the light, you can see how much darker that one is for some reason compared to the others. That one's got some nasty like carbon buildup on it. So that's something to be aware of. If we go back here to like this previous set, let me change my light source here. There we go. That's better. Oh, there we go. Okay, so you can see the tips on these plugs. There's some indicators there. And then these plugs also look completely different. So you'll notice on all of them, there's kind of consistency of this black carbony looking buildup on the ends of each of these plugs. You'll also notice that all of these plugs are dry. So there's no oil residue on any of my plugs, which is good. That means I've never had a valve cover leak or valve seals leaking or any indication of oil in or around my spark plugs. Every time I've ever changed my plugs, I've always had dry plugs, which I think is something to be aware of as well. But you'll see as you go through these, they get kind of this burnt look around on them as well. Those are indicators of plugs kind of reaching their lifespan. They get really hot and they start burning and scorching. There's ones that get really severe. You can see on these Denzos. These Denzos are toasty. I wouldn't put these in another car. I'm just showing you these because I had them laying around and they're junk plugs. You know, for the price of spark plugs on most cars, it's amazing that people don't change them more often. But again, if you're interested in what all these different indicators and colors and different burn marks and things on spark plugs mean, there is a ton of YouTube videos out there already covering all of that. I really don't want to get into that. That is a really deep subject. Reading spark plugs is what you would be looking for when it comes to information. But there's indicators. You know, you can see how these tips are burnt different than these tips. There's different colors and different things like that that are going to tell you whether your engine's running rich or lean, or you're getting too much fuel, or you're getting too much air. Maybe you're not getting enough air. You know, there's a lot of different indicators that you can learn about your engine just based off of a spark plug. So something to be aware of. Tools needed to complete this project are literally just a handful of tools, and they're basic tools that you'll find pretty much anywhere. I mean, this is common stuff, guys. If you're trying to do plugs and coils and you don't have these basic tools, then there's a problem. So I like to use a 1/4-inch drive ratchet, a 1/4-inch drive 10mm deep well socket. A 3/8 drive ratchet will do, a 3/8 extension, and a 5/8 spark plug socket. Spark plug sockets are different from regular sockets. You can kind of see, this one's hard to tell, but down in the socket there's like this rubber like grommet that basically grips onto the spark plug when you put it into the socket, so that you can drop the spark plug down into the hole. Wait, I have an engine right here. I can show you. Okay, so you need to put the spark plug in the socket, and you'll be able to lower it down into the hole and line it up and start threading it in without just dropping the plug down in the hole. Now, you don't want to just slam it down in there. You'll damage it. So, again, that's what that is. Now, you'll see that I have modified my extension and socket. This is basically an extension and spark plug socket that I have dedicated together. I have taped them together because I hate when I'm done and I, tighten the spark plug up and I go to pull the extension out and the extension pops out of the socket because the socket is stuck on the spark plug in the hole. It's kind of a pain in the neck. I hate it. So this is basically, I've just dedicated an extension, in a socket to spark plug use specifically. I don't know. This is just my easy fix, I guess. Kind of rigged, but it works. It just saves me the headache of trying to fish the socket out of the hole when I'm done. So, with that being said, let's get started on pulling the coil and plug out of the car. Okay, here we are in my engine bay, and I'm going to basically demonstrate pulling the ignition coil out and pulling the spark plug out, and then basically putting the spark plug back in and putting the ignition coil back in. Now, I've already done my new ignition coils on the car. I've went and test drove the car. The car runs amazing, so much better with the new coils in here. I changed my coils out because I was having a misfire issue. No check engine lights, no codes or anything for the misfire, but I was having a misfire issue only when I was like hammering on the throttle. Trying to do a pull in the car, it seemed to be misfiring really hard, and like sputtering and like just not running right at all. So that was kind of something that I've had to rule out a lot of other issues first before I said, hey, it's ignition coils. Ignition coils aren't really cheap, so it's not like I can just, I'll just go to the store and buy some ignition coils. You want to buy OEM ignition coils for the Hyundai engines. Don't buy eBay ones. Don't buy, cheap knockoff ones. You want to buy manufacturer Hyundai, Kia, OEM ignition coils. And the reason for that is because a lot of them are not made to the same quality standards that Hyundai and Kia make their ignition coils, first of all. And also the aftermarket ignition coils. I've actually got one right here. The aftermarket ignition coils, matter of fact, you can see the rubber boot doesn't even stay where it's supposed to. It's just loosey-goosey all on there. And I actually found when you put this ignition coil in the car and you tighten the 10 millimeter bolt down, the ignition coil actually wiggles around like it's loose. Like you could still tighten the bolt down more. And I like cranked the bolt down a little bit more, and the ignition coil still stays loose in there. And I mean, look at the boot doesn't even want to stay on the coil. Like, this is junk. You don't want to put this on your car. It doesn't fit right, and it's just going to cause more issues. So that's what buying a cheap ignition coil that doesn't fit right will do. And what I mean by wiggle, if I can get it to focus here. Can I get it to focus? Yeah, there we go. So when I had that other aftermarket ignition coil installed in here, I could actually take the ignition coil and wiggle it back and forth, even though the bolt that holds it down was completely tight. That's how bad the aftermarket coil fit. So I didn't have the aftermarket ignition coils in here. I didn't realize that was an aftermarket one. It kind of snuck its way into my spares that I have, and I accidentally installed it, not realizing it, and then it didn't fit, and it was pretty obvious. Now, on it, there's like no markings of any kind, really, for like a brand or anything like that. And you can just obviously tell it's not designed the same as the OEM coils. So we'll get into a little bit of that in a little bit. For now, we're going to pop off the wire harness here and the ignition coil and a plug. And I'm going to do this one-handed and show you how easy this is. So first thing first, obviously if you have a stock engine, you're going to want to remove your cover, that plastic cover that's on top of the engine. Clearly I don't have that, so it's much more accessible. Also, speaking of accessibility, I had lots of negative comments of people telling me that they would never make their hood open in reverse because it's going to make it extremely inconvenient to work on my engine bay and to do things like a tune-up on my engine bay. And I'm sorry, but that is like so not true that it's not even funny. Matter of fact, honestly, it's just as easy, if not easier, for me to just reach over the side of the car and reach anything and everything that I need to reach in my engine bay without the hood being in my way. I also want to make note that when I made my hood open in reverse, I designed it so that I can actually set my hood at multiple different opening heights so that I can actually tip it forward more and give myself more clearance area to work in the engine bay. And then in like a display mode or at a show, I can tip the hood back so that it slopes more and kind of flows more with the lines of the car. So I kind of had that thought in mind when I designed this, so I wanted it to stay out of my way, and it worked out pretty well. So without further ado here, let's get a plug ignition coil out of here. Now I'm going to do this with one hand, and I'm going to hold the camera while I'm doing this, so bear with me. But first things first, 10 millimeter on a ratchet. We're going to basically put it right there, and lefty-loosey, boom. We're just going to pop that 10 millimeter loose. Yours might be a little tighter than mine, but once those 10 millimeters are loose, you can go right out of here by hand. Boom. I like using that tray right here to hold tools and such. Okay, so we got that bolt out. We're going to just pop the wire harness off of here. There's this little gray clip. All you got to do is put your fingernail in there, boom, and pop it out. And then it's a typical squeeze on the clip, and it comes right out. Now that you got that up and out of the way, you can grab your ignition coil and just kind of pop it right up and pull it out. And boom, there you go. You've removed the ignition coil. To inspect your coils, really what you're doing is you're looking for cracks and damage to the ignition coil itself. Any oil or residue like that down here on the end or around the shaft here is going to indicate that you've got a valve cover gasket leaking basically around this hole. the valve cover gasket is seeping oil down into that hole, and it's leaking onto your ignition coil, and that can cause a misfire on your ignition coil. So be aware of that. A valve cover gasket is really cheap and easy to do, so why would you let it leak like that? Okay, ignition coil's out of the way. Your next step, take your socket with your extension and drop it down into the hole. Don't literally drop it, be gentle. But you're going to just kind of drop it down in there, and you're going to feel it lock onto the spark plug and kind of press it down a little bit, and it'll kind of press down that little rubber grommet that's inside the socket onto the spark plug. We take our ratchet, make sure it's the off position, and get it on here. And now your spark plugs might be tight in there. The other thing I want to mention before you just pull the spark plug out of the hole, you want to make sure you look down in that hole and make sure there's no like junk or grit or dirt or anything like that in that hole. Because if you were to just take the spark plug out of the hole right now and there's dirt in there, then that means all that dirt is going to fall down into your cylinder, and there could be grime that could cause damage to your cylinder. So you want to make sure that your hole here is blown out of debris. I know mine are. I literally just had my ignition coils out like 24 hours ago. So I know that these are clean. So I'm going to just proceed with removing my spark plug and show you how that goes next here. So again, loosen. Now, I can kind of feel that once it's loosened, it's basically like hand tight in there. I will, use the ratchet to get the spark plug most of the way out. Towards the very end, I like to remove the ratchet and actually unscrew the spark plug by hand, just to assure that I'm not like ruining any of the threads in there. You have to remember that the spark plugs are threaded into a aluminum block or an aluminum head. Those are aluminum threads in there, so they're very easy to cross thread or damage. See, we're right here towards the end, so I'm going to pop the ratchet off. And then you can see you can just kind of unscrew the rest here by hand. Come on. It's almost there. Okay. Boom. And then out we come with the spark plug. Now, you can see these. Oh, come on. I can get it to focus here. There we go. Okay. This is my current plugs. They're a little wetter than I'd like them to be. It's a little concerning that they're kind of wet. I'm not really sure. I haven't driven the car a whole lot. I basically just kind of drove it down the block and back with the new ignition coils in. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm going to throw new plugs in the car. It's been a couple years since I've had new plugs in the car. These look kind of dark, kind of gross, compared to the last set that I pulled out. So we're going to be doing new plugs. I also noticed these are a little burnt here. So yeah, for the sake of throwing new plugs in the car, I have a new set. We're going to put new sets in. So I run HKS M45XL, and these are one heat range colder of a plug than the stock plug. And the reason why I run one heat range colder is because of all of the bolt-on components that I have on the car and the tune. The tune adjusts timing, and I have a lot of playing with air and fuel mixtures because of the increased airflow and things like that. It's just recommended that you run a stage colder of a plug. If you're not tuned, you can still run a factory plug. You could run the colder plug. Either way, you really need to get a tune on the car once you start getting to like a full bolt-on level, or you get past intake exhaust type mods. Really, even with an intake exhaust, I recommend looking into getting a tune. You're really going to see the biggest jump in power and efficiency out of the car with the tune installed. So really doing the colder plugs is just the recommendation. Usually before you get a tune, you throw a new set of ignition coils in, you throw a new set of colder plugs in, and then you go get the tune. So it's just something to keep in mind. I want to show you here. This is a brand new spark plug. So you can see how clean the tip is. We do want to check spark plug gap and things like that before we install these. Checking spark plug gap is easy. You can get one of these from like AutoZone. Matter of fact, I think, yeah, this is an AutoZone one. And around the outside of it here, you can see 0.050, 0.060, 0.070, you know, etc., etc. And that is the thickness. As it goes around, it gets thicker. And that is how you measure the spark plug gap. So you want to measure the gap in between the electrode and the metal tip. On the Veloster Turbo for a tuned bolted on Veloster Turbo, I think it's 0.028. If I remember correctly, that's the recommendation by everybody. 0.028. I'm gonna stick with that. 0.028, I believe, is the correct gap for the HKS plugs on a tuned bolted on modified Veloster. If you don't have one of these, you can also get yourself a set of feeler gauges. Feeler gauges come in various thicknesses as well. They're usually numbered in decimals as well. And they work the same way. You know, you slide the correct thickness in between the electrode and the end or the tip of the spark plug and measure the gap. And if it's too big or too small, you need to correctly gap the plugs. Most plugs come pre-gapped. This being kind of a user-friendly performance plug, I always recommend checking gap on them just because you never know. Or maybe they're not gapped correctly for your car specifically, so something to keep in mind. Back over here to the car. Oh, what did I do with that plug? Hold on, I need to throw that back in the car for now. Reinstalling the spark plug in the car. We are going to put it back into the socket. Now, I don't like pressing it all the way down into the socket at first. I kind of leave it out just a little bit. That way, like, it still comes out of the socket. So, boom, we go back in. Back over here to the car. You can see how the spark plug doesn't fall out of the socket when we put it upside down. And again, you do not want to just drop it down into this hole. You want to gently go down in and find where it's at and finger thread it in slowly. You'll feel it catch the threads and it'll thread in nicely. If you feel any resistance whatsoever, back it out and start it again. Because if you cross thread a spark plug into the spark plug hole, you're in for a mess. You don't want to do that. So again, thread it in by hand. You can see how easy it's threading in. It's nice and smooth. It's not catching up on anything. And I'm going to do this basically till it gets too tight for me to turn it by hand, and then we'll put a ratchet on it. Boom, okay. So, ratchet to the on position. Get it on here. And give it kind of a good little snug. Another good little snug. Now, I've been doing this for a really long time, so I kind of have an idea how tight spark plugs are supposed to be when you put them into a car. Most cars are like a similar torque spec, I guess you could say. I'll be honest, I don't know what the factory torque spec is on a spark plug for the Hyundai Veloster. I've always just kind of like, okay, that feels good enough. I have done tune-ups for people on their cars where they were having issues with misfires, and I've actually pulled their plugs and found out that they were like barely tightened or not torqued at all. So you do want to make sure that they're like tight. They don't need to be like He-Man'd in there, but they do need to be snug. So I've pulled plugs out of people's cars that were like finger tight, and I'm like, well, there's your problem, you know. Putting the ignition coil back in, basically it needs to just kind of go down in nice and straight, and you're just going to kind of press it down evenly, and you'll kind of feel it bottom out, and then you're going to want to line up the hole right over here for the 10 millimeter bolt to go back in. So just kind of get it all pressed back down in and lined up. And then you can take your 10 millimeter. I'm sorry, it's an M6, but it's a 10 millimeter head. And boom. Again, finger threaded in. You're screwing into aluminum. So finger thread in, get it kind of tight, on position, back in with your 10 millimeter. Now these don't have to be tight at all. These are very, very easy to tighten up. So you do not want to crank on these. They're very easy to strip. Again, just an aluminum casting. And then you're going to take your plug from your wire harness and you're going to plug it back into the ignition coil here. And boom, you're going to press that little gray clip down and you're done. So do that on all 4 cylinders. I will say the 4th one over here where your fuel pump is a little bit trickier, but not too big of a deal. You can kind of finagle it out of there. And yeah, that is pulling the ignition coil and the spark plug and putting it back in. I just want to show how easy that it is. It's not a difficult job. You can buy your own spark plugs at pretty much any auto parts store if you really wanted to. If you're into performance with this car in any way, I really recommend you spend money on a better plug. The HKSs are, I don't know, like $130, $140 for a set, kind of depending on where you buy them from. They're kind of an expensive plug, $24, $25 a piece plug in some cases. So, a better performance end result, a better performing plug, a longer lasting plug, but way more expensive. You could run the NGK plugs that are out there in the world. I think from the factory, the Veloster comes with a Denso plug. I'm pretty sure that's what these are. These are a factory plug. I don't know if these came out of a turbo or a non-turbo, but I know these are Veloster plugs. You can go with like a factory spec spark plug and a factory ignition coil on your car. That's my recommendation. Putting a iridium spark plug in your car with no performance stuff done, will it perform better slightly? Sure. Is it worth the extra price? I don't know. That's for you to decide. But with ignition coils, it matters. So what I'm getting at there is you want to make sure that you are buying OEM ignition coils for your Hyundai and Kia cars, okay? And I'm saying that because people have problems with anything else. It's just a known fact. So on your ignition coil, you know that it's an authentic Hyundai Kia coil. First of all, because the rubber boot literally has a Hyundai and Kia emblem stamped on it in multiple places. And then the ignition coil itself also has a Hyundai part number right there. And it has the Hyundai Kia emblem stamped in it. Usually the tops are just a gloss black. I have some dots on here so that I can keep mine numbered. You'll notice that one's got 3. That one's got 2. This is just my way. I use a paint pen, and it was just my way of like keeping my ignition coils numbered if I ever had to remove them and I didn't want to mix them up. So just keeping them so like I know what cylinder ignition coil came out of. I know what cylinder spark plug come out of. I like to label things. Basically, you could take a little Sharpie and just make some hash marks on the side of the spark plug, and that can indicate to you what cylinder your plugs came out of if you ever needed to refer back to those. So I have a couple things here. So I showed you the aftermarket cheap Chinese ignition coil earlier here in this video and why these are trash. I want to show you on this ignition coil. This is actually an OEM ignition coil that is cracked, and you can see right there on the base of this that great big crack that goes across it. This is a bad ignition coil. That's stuff that you want to look for, is that damage like that. That is going to cause this to not properly ignite or not work as efficiently as it should, and could seriously damage an engine. This could cause misignition in that cylinder and detonation and all kinds of things. So, inspect your ignition coils every so often, folks. It's really easy to do. This was an easy catch. You pull this ignition coil out and go, oh, that needs to be replaced. And you throw a new one in and go about your day. It's not that difficult. So I've got some extra coils. They're all OEM. I like to keep some good ones laying around for diagnosing other cars. I can easily swap them out if I think I have a misfire issue or an ignition coil issue. I can confirm that by switching coils that I have, spare ones, coils. Here is the part number for the OEM coils that I bought. 27301 2B110. These are made in Korea. These are original OE Hyundai ignition coils. I know this because they had the tamper seals and OEM part numbers, OEM boxes. Everything was packaged OE. Everything is labeled OE. So I know what I bought. You just be aware of what you're buying. Just because something is advertised on Amazon or eBay as an OE coil, you want to make sure that it's an OEM replacement, not a knockoff, and you don't get yourself some crap parts and wonder why you still have problems. So that basically wraps us up for today. I just want to talk about this because it was something that I was having an issue with, these ignition coils. Through like my last season with the car, I was driving it a lot and I wasn't really having any issues driving it under regular conditions. It was only when I was, launching the car or, trying to race the car that it was misfiring and falling on its face and stuttering and all kinds of stuff. So, I am happy that I decided just to throw some ignition coils in here and it seems to have fixed the problem. I will figure that out a little bit better with my trip this weekend. I'm going down to St. Louis. It's about a 4.5 hour drive. I'll be there for Import Face Off this weekend. So hopefully maybe I'll come home with another one of these from St. Louis. But with that being said, we'll see how the car drives. Maybe I'll do an update next week.
Hey guys, so that pretty much wraps us up on today's video. I just wanted to show some of the ignition coil differences, talk about, what the spark plugs should look like when they come out, show you how easy and simple it is to change your own plugs and coils. Obviously, I did that one-handed. It was pretty straightforward. If you have older plugs that have been in there for a little while, you might struggle a little bit more with breaking them loose and getting them out of the hole. Remember to clean the hole first, blow it out with some air. Make sure that there's no crud down in that hole before you pull your plugs, because you don't want that crud down in your cylinders. And don't over torque them. There's no need to go crazy with them. I see that a lot. People think that they need to over tighten spark plugs, and they end up damaging threads or ruining plugs and things like that. So stuff to keep in mind. Hopefully this video helped some people out. You can take a spark plug out of your car, and based off of how the end of that spark plug looks, you can determine some possible issues that you may be having with your engine. You can determine whether your engine is running a little rich or running a little lean, or maybe there's some detonation happening, misfire happening, things like that. Maybe you have an oil leak, maybe you have a valve seal problem. Anything like that can show you, some pre-telltale signs of what might be going on with an engine just by pulling your spark plugs out and doing a simple inspection. So hopefully this helps. If you're interested in learning more about what different spark plug colorings and how to read a spark plug, there's a plethora of informational videos out here on YouTube that will show you and talk about some of the differences of spark plugs. You can see what plugs look like after a head gasket's been blown. You can see what spark plugs look like if your engine's running extremely rich, or if they're covered in carbon buildup and things like that, that'll cause misfires. All kinds of stuff to be aware of there. If you're interested in learning more and following the build and checking out more of my content, hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment if you have a comment. Find me on all social media platforms at Steve the Woody Peterson. As always, I appreciate you watching and checking out the content. Please like, share, follow. My name again is Steve Peterson, and that's my Hyundai Veloster Turbo.